Among the many splendors of India are the forts and palaces which belong to India's sovereign princes. In 1948, the princes renounced their feudal states and most of their fortunes. Eventually, many palaces were renovated to accommodate luxurious tourist requirements. I'll show you a few of these palaces in this presentation. First, we will visit Srinagar, sometimes pronounced Srinagar by Anglo-Saxons. It is in the beautiful valley of Kashmir, which lies at a mean altitude of 5,200 feet, surrounded by towering mountains. We have arrived at the Oberoi Palace Hotel, which was a summer residence of their former highnesses of Jammu and Kashmir. The palace overlooks the Dal Lake, where houseboats are tethered to distant shores. The climate in autumn and spring is ideal, with cool nights and sunny days. These lovely days are suffused with softness and a golden light. Entering the palace, we face the stairway leading to the former royal family's private suite, now offered to travelers. One of the royal bedrooms, the coat of arms still on the headboard. Another view of the same room. Each suite consists of a bedroom, dressing room, luxurious bathroom, sitting room, and sometimes a foyer. One might choose a room on the ground floor. A walk to the window provides a view of the sunny garden and the Dal Lake, where the changing light is a source of enchantment. If one arrives in the morning, lunch in the garden might seem inviting. A delicious buffet provides a choice of Indian or Western delicacies. At dinner time, after perhaps a visit to the cocktail lounge, a varied menu is offered in the main dining room. Next day you will surely want to venture forth to enjoy the beauty of the enchanted valley. An afternoon on the Dal Lake in a shikara. A shikara is a gondola-like boat furnished with chintz curtains and pillows and rowed by an oarsman who sits discreetly behind the curtain and propels the boat silently with a single oar. The shoreline is always dreamlike, with its poplars and occasional ancient houses bathed in that special Kashmiri light against the background of the mountains. There are little islands with canals to explore. From the water, one can better see the Oberoi Palace Hotel. Not to be missed are the beautiful gardens laid out by the Mughal emperors in the 16th and 17th centuries. They were imperial pleasure gardens overlooking the water and backed by the mountains. On the way to the gardens, we see Kashmiri women in their typical Muslim dress. We have arrived at one of the gardens. The lake is visible beyond. It is said that England cannot grow a flower that will not flourish in Kashmir. And indeed, they flourish in profusion. Waterways were a specialty of these gardens, though today the water is often turned off for economical purposes. There are charming pavilions under the shade of the towering chenar trees. Indians love their places of beauty and history. These men are making garlands as they bask in the gentle sunlight. A trip through the countryside to a higher altitude is a delightful experience. The land is fertile and well cared for. Sheep add pastoral charm. And of course, there are always goats and their herdsmen. After the grain has been separated from the chaff is piled into high cones. The populace of Kashmir is largely Muslim. The writing on the shop walls is Urdu. Now that we have climbed to a higher altitude, there is a nip in the air, and the water in the river is glacial. Our next visit will take us almost to the southern tip of India. We go to Mysore in Karnataka to stay in one of the charming palaces built by the former Maharaja for royal guests. The terrain in this part of India is very different. Being on the Deccan Plateau, the altitude is around 2,000 feet, and a gentle breeze seems to blow constantly. Dramatic rock outcroppings sever fertile fields and interrupt the landscape. Rice paddies abound. One comes across lovely small lakes. Bullocks' eyes are almond-shaped, and their beautiful parallel horns seem to point straight to heaven. Hindu temples of the south have pyramidal sculptured towers over the entrance of the temple compound. This is the Chamund Ishwari temple dedicated to the royal family's titular deity. The base of the temple is 2,000 years old, while the tower was added about 300 years ago. As the goddess Chamundi is a form of Kali, she is the consort of the god Shiva. Therefore, Nandi, Shiva's vehicle, faces the temple. This 16-foot Nandi is carved out of a single huge boulder and is attended by priests and revered by the devout. From the Chamundi hill we get our first view of the Lalita Mahal Palace where we will be staying. Building of the Lalita Mahal Palace started in 1921 and was completed 10 years later. It was intended as a guest palace for very special guests. The architect was a Frenchman named Fritschli. The palace was turned into a hotel in 1974. On entering, we face the main stairway. Long corridors branch out from the main hall. On the right are doors to guest room suites. On the left, perforated marble screening permits a view of the gardens. An inner court, a corner of the state dining room now available to the hotel guests. In a new wing, bedrooms and their private balconies overlook other landscaped gardens. But in the older part of the building are suites which were occupied by such dignitaries as the Viceroy of India. This bedroom was also used by the President of India. I was told that the blue suite was occupied by the late Prime Minister of India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. I photographed this 1 week before the tragedy of her assassination. Of course, these suites all had luxurious dressing rooms, bathrooms, and sitting rooms. Looking through to the balcony, which leads to the handsome terrace, we travel north again to Rajasthan, where we will visit 3 very important former feudal states. I've numbered them on the map in the order of our visits, as I don't want to subject you to more maps. These 3 former states were among the 5 most important and largest in Rajasthan. The name Rajasthan means land of princes. These princes were Rajputs belonging to the Kshatriya caste, whose duty and destiny it was to be rulers and warriors. Rajputs are very orthodox and value honor and bravery above all other virtues. Rajasthan, being largely desert, is camel country. Bullocks, which are used in the less arid parts of the state, are quite different from the Mysore bullocks, but are very handsome in their own right. Rajasthani villagers love to dress in brilliant colors. Here are some ladies enjoying a religious festival. Our first visit will be to Jaipur, now the capital of Rajasthan. Originally, the feudal state of Jaipur covered an area of 15,600 square miles. The later city of Jaipur was designed and built by Maharaja Sawai Jai Singh of the Kachawa clan, a brilliant intellect who laid out the city on very modern lines and moved his capital in 1727 from fortified Amber. Jaipur is called the Pink City, decorated with charming white designs. The city is planned on a grid pattern with wide, straight streets. The town is surrounded on the north and east by rugged hills crowned with forts. On the city side, the face of the ridge is scarped and inaccessible. The fort which you see is called Nahargarh. The Palace of the Winds, called the Hawa Mahal, was built in 1799 by Maharaja Sawai Pratap Singh, so that ladies of the zenana might look out on the main street to see what was going on. It is like a high screen, 7 stories high, consisting of perforated windows and balconies where ladies could see without being seen themselves. I have climbed it myself, and the view is spectacular. We are now in the city palace, which occupies 1/7 of the city of Jaipur and is surrounded by a masonry wall. Many state buildings, as well as a museum, are included in the city palace. The white building at the top of the picture was reserved for the royal palace. The flag flew when the Maharaja was in residence. Even though the Indian government has revoked the titles of princes, the flag flies when the son of the last Maharaja is in residence. Sawai Jai Singh was deeply interested in astronomy. He designed and built 5 astronomical observatories in various parts of India, the largest being in Jaipur. These instruments of observation obtained remarkably accurate results and gave him a high place among the astronomers of the world. Here is our first view of the lovely Rambagh Palace, where we will be guests. It was built by Sawai Jai Singh, the builder of the city of Jaipur, around 1727. For many years, the royal family used it as their residence. In later times, Maharaja Sawai Man Singh, the last Maharaja of Jaipur, and his beautiful wife, Gayatri Devi, used it as their residence. After the breaking up of the sovereign kingdom, the Rambagh Palace was turned into a luxury hotel. Today, one dines in the state dining room. During meals, soft Indian music is played by excellent artists. The Polo cocktail bar is filled with mementos from Maharaja Man Singh's polo days. A charming veranda is available for relaxing or a cup of tea. A typical bedroom, part of a suite. There are many public drawing rooms. This one is used for private parties and is furnished with priceless Chinese artifacts. No visit to Jaipur would be complete without a visit to Amber, the former capital of the Kachawas. The knife-like surrounding mountain summits are heavily fortified, as you can notice. Arriving at Amber, one sees the grim fortress Jagar, which guarded the summit of the hill. In the 11th century, the Kachawa Rajputs wrested this land from the tribal Suswatminas, establishing their capital here, where they remained for 600 years. However, many of the Suswatminas still inhabit the area. In the year 1600, the exquisite palace of Amber was commenced by Maharaja Man Singh. It was only completed 100 years later by Jai Singh before he created his new capital, Jaipur. As there is quite an ascent to the palace, those who wish to can ride on an elephant. Those who feel safer on wheels can ascend by their cars. A corner of the palace and a good view of the battlements on the crest of the precipitous hills. We have arrived and are standing in the hall of public audience, facing the doorway leading into the palace. This is only one of the many exquisite buildings within the palace, but time is limited. Notice the double archways, the mosaic, and the carved marble floral panels at the base of this building. These mosaics are of mirror, colored glass, and semi-precious stones. A corner of an interior garden. We now start our trip into the desert westward to Marwar, meaning land of sand. The Rathors, an important and powerful Rajput clan, overcame Mandore, capital of the Parihar Rajputs, in 1381. The Rathors used Mandore as their capital until the building of the Jodhpur fort in the 15th century. Here we see Marwar, the land of sand, with its strange, austere beauty. The Mehrangarh fort rises 400 feet above the city on a scarped, isolated rock. Foundations for the fort were laid in 1459 by Rao Jodha. The fort's dramatic palaces are the creation of several successive rulers, and its walls have proved practically impregnable. A view from the interior overlooking some of the fortifications. Through an elephant gate, we see 3 lines of defenses. 7 portals protect entrances to the fort. The last, or Lohar Gate, has the palm prints of some ladies who immolated themselves on the funeral pyre of their husbands. The handsome modern palace, called the Umaid Bhawan, was started in 1929 by Maharaja Umaid Singh in order to give employment to thousands of people during a period of famine. It was completed in 1942. The palace is built of rose-colored local sandstone. Each huge block of stone is hand-chiseled and set into place without mortar. It has been equipped with every modern convenience and now is available to tourists. It has an apartment for the former royal family as well as a museum. In one of the main floor rotundas one sees the stonework, but the lines resembling mortar are merely decorative, as the stones are set one on the other without mortar. One of the formal rotundas. The curving stairway. A bedroom with silk hangings and bedspread. The tiger suite for those who enjoy big game. Here is the tiger suite foyer. The fountain is silver and crystal. Another double occupancy suite. And a look at its luxurious bathroom. The ancient Mehrangarh fort seen from the balcony of the Umaid Bhawan Palace. I want to take you back there for a moment to compare the decor of the ancient and the modern palaces. Now in the Mehrangarh fort we see the Maharaja's private audience hall, a smaller sitting room, the Maharaja's old-time bedroom. The fan was suspended from the ceiling and was manipulated by bearers from outside the room to ensure the Maharaja's privacy. Our last view of Marwar brings us to the beautiful and moving chhatris on a hilltop at Mandore. These chhatris memorialize the queens who became sati on their husbands' funeral pyres. The Aravalli mountain ranges through which we are now traveling are the worn-down remains of some of the oldest and once the highest mountains in the world. We saw some of these ranges in Jaipur. On leaving Jodhpur, we now go to Mewar, which is our last visit. Mewar's dynastic clan, the Sisodias, are said to rank above all others in the Rajput hierarchy. Their rulers are called Ranas or Maharanas, not to be confused with the word Rani, which means a princess or a queen. The Sisodia Rajputs claim to trace their ancestry almost back to the time of Christ. But in 734, The Sisodias captured the great fort of Chittor from the Maurya Rajputs, thereafter using it as their capital until 1567, when the devastating victory of Mughal Emperor Akbar over the Sisodias forced them out of Chittor. The fort is 3½ miles long from north to south and ½ a mile wide. The Rajput honor code demanded that should a siege on their fort be so serious that defeat was inevitable, a few warriors might be sent out to fight as guerrillas, and a royal child smuggled out to grow up and start the clan again. But capture was untenable. A great fire was built in a palace vault. The ladies, dressed in their wedding clothes, holding their babies and singing, would one after the other voluntarily leap into the fire. Their husbands, who must witness this, would then mark their foreheads with the ashes of their dear ones. Donning their saffron robes, they would throw open the fort gates and fight until death. Nothing else was tenable. This desperate ceremony, called Johar, was performed in 1313, in 1535, and again for the last time in 1567 at the time of Akbar's siege. In time, the smuggled child, Prince Uday Singh, grew up and became Maharana Uday Singh, establishing the new Sisodia capital at Udaipur. He built his capital on the banks of Lake Pichola. We see a part of his royal palace. The city was well guarded by bastion walls. This picture shows the whole palace, the largest in Rajasthan. The city and its temples lie beyond. The Maharana's bloodline belonged to the Sun dynasty. His people felt the need of seeing him every day before they had any food. As he was often on military campaigns, he installed this sun emblem. The populace were satisfied, and after paying their respects to the emblem, they would go for their breakfasts. Looking from inside the palace, one can see the town and some of the many man-made lakes. The Aravalli Hills surround Udaipur. The altitude is almost 2,000 feet, so the air is delicious. We will stay in the Lake Palace Hotel, originally called the Jag Niwas. It was the royal summer palace. One arrives by small boat. On the hill beyond is the Monsoon Palace, where the Maharana used to take a few favorite queens to enjoy the dramatic cloud effects at monsoon time. Our little boat brings us to the terrace of the Lake Palace Hotel. The reception hall. My bedroom, larger and more spacious than it appears in this picture. It included a very nice dressing room, sitting areas overlooking the lake, and a spacious bathroom. But best of all, I could balance my camera on the windowsill and get this picture of the setting moon. The interior palace gardens are pure enchantment, and often breathtaking. A lovely reflection. Still within the palace, we see abundant flowers and marble pavilions. A quiet spot for meditation. A Maharana's secluded garden has been turned into a swimming pool area. I will show you rooms where the decor has remained in the old style. Swings were very popular. The Maharana's portrait is painted on the wall. Looking from one of the high terraces, one sees the other island palace on Lake Pichola. It is the Jag Mandir. Work on the palace was begun in 1615. It is very famous as it gave refuge to Mughal Prince Khurram, who later became Emperor Shah Jahan, the builder of the Taj Mahal. Prince Khurram was given sanctuary by the Maharana Udaipur when he was in revolt against his father, Emperor Jahangir. Visitors to the Jagmandir are welcomed by saluting elephants. Here is the palace used by Prince Khurram. And his intimate garden. The view from the upper story of the island palace. The time has come to return to the lake palace. Each sunset, a moment always to be remembered. The magic of India. Sri Lanka, the resplendent isle, for some years known to the Western world as Ceylon, has an absolutely fascinating past. The earliest conquerors of the island were North Indians of royal lineage, who pushed aside Lanka's aboriginal inhabitants in the 5th century BC, establishing their own kingdom in North Lanka. These North Indians were known as the Lion People, and their descendants ruled Lanka for 2,311 years. The people of Lanka are called Sinhalese. Sinha means a lion. From the 3rd century before Christ onward, the natural riches of Lanka tempted many outsiders to invade. During the next 1,000 years of Lanka's recorded history, the predators were principally the Tamils of South India, who conquered, held the island for a while, only to be thrown out. But eventually they would attack again. The Brahmanical name for the island at that time was Lanka. Later Arabs, who were superb seamen, discovered Lanka. Coming as traders, they wanted Lanka's spices and peerless precious stones. They called the island Serendip, a word which means unexpected delight. The Muslims firmly believed that their island was a retreat for Adam and Eve after their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. By the 16th century, the Europeans were dipping their fingers into the jam pot. In 1505, the Portuguese conquered the island. In the mid-17th century, the Dutch pushed out the Portuguese, and by the end of the 18th century, the British had taken over, naming the island Ceylon, and henceforth ruling for 140 years. They were all after the same thing, the wonderful spices and the precious gemstones, which were dug from gravel pits deep in the earth, just as they are today. In 1948, Ceylon became independent. The name which they chose for themselves was Sri Lanka, the resplendent isle. Sri Lanka lies like a beautiful jewel in the southeastern tip of India, and a lovelier island one cannot imagine. Lanka can boast of the earliest and the longest uninterrupted written history in Asia. The earliest part of this chronicle was inscribed on palm leaves and in delightful and readable verse by a gifted monk who was said to have been of royal lineage. His remarkable chronicle is called the Mahavamsa, which he compiled with the help of the Dipavamsa and other earlier chronicles. The Mahavamsa covers a period of over 1,000 years, from the 6th century BC to the late 5th century AD, giving fascinating and very readable accounts of the kings and their doings. At the great monk's death, later monks continued the chronicle without interruption for another 1,300 years in 3 consecutive chronicles collectively called the Kulavamsa. These later chronicles were written successively by monks who continued the history until 1815, when the British conquered Kandy. Kandy was the last refuge of the Sinhalese kings. The great chronicle tells in allegorical form the story of the first king of Lanka, who is supposed to have arrived in Lanka in the 5th century B.C. The Mahavamsa tells of an Aryan prince from North India whose grandfather happened to be a lion, because his grandmother, a headstrong Aryan princess, seemed not to care where she bestowed her favors. The princess gave birth to twins. The boy twin was said to have been born with lion paws instead of hands and feet, and was named Sinhabahu. Sinha means a lion, as I've said. In time, Sinhabahu became king. His elder son was named Vijaya, and was a very wicked boy. He even tried to shoot the sun. Vijaya did so many evil things, he was finally expelled from the kingdom by his royal father. Crossing overland accompanied by about 700 of his most intimate friends, who had learned their bad manners from Vijaya, they reached the ocean and sailed by boat to the beautiful island of Lanka. The Mahavamsa chronicle allegorically tells that on arrival they found the island inhabited by yakas, unfriendly supernatural creatures who could appear or vanish at will, or change form whenever they felt like it. These yakas detested mortal men and wouldn't tolerate them on the island. I want to emphasize that though these stories were told in allegorical form, they undoubtedly had their foundation in reality. Therefore, the allegorical yakas might well have represented the unfriendly aboriginal island inhabitants. I personally think the mythological version is more fun, but you decide the explanation which pleases you. According to the story, Vijaya's first encounter on the island was with a yakini, a female yaka, who hypnotized Vijaya into thinking she was a beautiful 16-year-old girl. She did this in order to catch and kill him, but Vijaya turned the tables on her and managed to seduce her. She seemed very pleased with Vijaya, and so they set up housekeeping. This gave Vijaya time to establish a capital for his kingdom, which he called Rajarata. As you can see, it was in the drier northern part of the island. When it came time for his coronation, Vijaya thought it more fitting to have a mortal princess as queen instead of a supernatural consort. Vijaya managed to get rid of the yakini, who was promptly killed by the yakas. Of course, Vijaya knew that this would happen. Vijaya then imported an Indian princess from Madurai, who became queen. It is said that from then on Vijaya reformed, becoming a good, responsible, and honorable king. Later kings began to realize that the lack of rainfall in the northern area in which the kingdoms had been established was a tremendous handicap. So they started building enormous artificial lakes by damming up the river streams and originating in the mountains of the central massif, which receive copious monsoon rain. This practice developed into one of the most ingenious systems of irrigation the ancient world has ever known, and in fact it rivals some of the most modern irrigation systems. Subsequent kings continued the practice. Lanka was studded with gloriously beautiful man-made lakes, and the arid land became fertile and green. At this point, we will begin our actual journey in Sri Lanka. It will begin in Galle, at the southwestern tip of the island. We shall wend our way northward along the seacoast until we reach Anuradhapura, which was founded in the late 5th century B.C., and was destined to become the seat of Sinhalese kings for the next 1400 years. We are now in Galle, at the southwestern tip of Sri Lanka, which was settled by the Dutch in the 17th century A.D. The atmosphere of Galle is very European. The journey along the seacoast is truly ravishing, with changing silvery light and volatile clouds. These pictures were taken during the winter monsoon, which brings short, precipitous rain during the afternoon. Fishing is the main means of livelihood. A typical fishing boat. Fishermen's houses are close to the beach. Nets are carried in and hung up to dry. This lady sweeps the sand in front of her house. One can just see the tiny oil lamp which illuminates the interior. Fishermen need only take a few steps to bathe in a lagoon. Laundry is done from a sandbar. About 50 yards inland, the highway is flanked by more urban houses. Please notice the green tassels dangling from the top of the picture. In this case, these tassels indicate that the body of a deceased Buddhist will be carried along this path to his cremation. The cremation takes place within this specially constructed enclosure. Had the deceased been a Buddhist monk, the funeral edifice would have been saffron, the color of a Buddhist monk's robes. We have arrived at the great and ancient capital of Anuradhapura, which lay in ruins for centuries. I've tried to indicate the many artificial lakes which still exist and are used for irrigation as they were always meant to be. The groves of trees still remain green in the ancient ruins. Anuradhapura was a magnificently planned city with a circumference of 50 miles, suburbs lying beyond. This picture, actually taken in the rain, gives an idea of the age of these groves when one realizes the size of the stumps being chopped at by these women. There were many Hindu temples, of course. The settlers, having come from North India, were Hindus. In the 3rd century B.C., a great event was to change all this. At that time, the king was Devanampiatissa, a Hindu, of course. One day, the king went hunting in the Masaka hills. He saw a beautiful Sambur stag. The king hadn't the heart to kill him, so he followed the stag, who led him to the mountain Mihintali, where he found Mahinda, the Buddhist monk, and son of the great emperor Ashoka of India, who had been sent by his father to convert Lanka to Buddhism. It is said that the monk Mahinda arrived from India on a full moon night. Flying high as fly the golden geese. Devanampiatissa was totally converted to Buddhism. From that time on, Anuradhapura became a religious center as well as a glorious city of kings. Buddhism is the primary religion of Sri Lanka until this day. The Emperor Ashoka, being well pleased with the conversion of Lanka to Buddhism, sent Sinhalese king Devanampiatissa some very precious relics, which included a fragment of the Buddha's collarbone. I want to explain that Hindus and Buddhists are cremated rather than buried after death. Small fragments of bone or a tooth or two may remain after the burning. In the Lord Buddha's case, these became sacred relics. Devanampiatissa built the Tuparama, which is a dagaba, to enshrine the relics so that it now could be a focus of worship. A dagaba is a mound containing a sacred object, the entrance of which has been sealed forever. The Tuparama is the oldest historical dagaba in Anuradhapura, having been built in the 3rd century B.C. In spite of its being quite small, it certainly has great beauty. Next, Emperor Ashoka sent his daughter, Princess Religieuse Sangamita, to Lanka with a branch of the sacred Bodhi tree under which the Buddha had received his spiritual enlightenment in North India. The branch miraculously grew roots and was planted on a terraced pavilion. Here you see this very same tree today after 2,250 years. The Sinhalese claim it to be the oldest historically documented tree in the world. Shrines and monasteries surround the terrace of the sacred Bodhi tree. Notice how the curve of the old man's back echoes in reverse the bend of the ancient tree beyond him. And now descendants of the original tree are worshipped by the pilgrims, as are all Bodhi trees growing throughout Sri Lanka. About 100 years later, in the 2nd century B.C., Lanka suffered a long period of oppression under South India Chola domination. A Sinhalese prince, Duttagamanu, seen here devoutly bareheaded and barefooted, was destined to become the paladin of Sinhalese nationalism. Mustering an army of 10,000 men, Duttagamanu slew the Chola king who had conquered his country, thus liberating his people. In the handle of Duttagamanu's spear was enshrined a holy relic of the Buddha. The spear implanted itself in the earth at the site of victory and could not be withdrawn. Duttagamanu enshrined the spear in a great Dagobah which is known as the Miri Savati. Duttagamanu became a very great king, building many important monuments. One of the most impressive monuments was the Ruwenwali Dagobah built towards the end of Duttagamanu's life. The pillars which you see are the remains of the monasteries which surround the Dagobah. When Duttagamanu picked out the site for this great edifice, divine acceptance was assured by a quaking of the earth. Full of joy, the king proceeded with the architectural plans. The Mahavansa, as usual, tells us all about it. Quote, "The king caused to be made of precious things an exquisitely beautiful bow tree, its leaves glittering with gems." End quote. This was, and still is, one of the treasures enshrined and sealed within the great Dagobah. Rows of elephants surround the entire plinth. Smaller Dagobahs are placed at the corners. The pious, whether monk or villager, is always to be found praying or meditating at the site of consecrated places. In 104 BC, more South Indians' invasions forced a later king, Walagambahu, to flee from Anuradhapura. The invaders, who held the northern territory, never penetrated the south. Walagambahu and his followers took refuge deep in the mountains of the south, where they will remain for 15 years, until the North Indians were finally cast out of the Lanka. During this period, Walagambahu's hiding places were many, and he built stupas and other religious monuments in the south. One of his hiding places was in the Dambula caves. After his triumphant return to Anuradhapura 15 years later, the king had the Dambula caves transformed into rock-cut temples. These caves are close to the summit of the great rock outcropping. One only sees the top of the rock in this picture. To get from the bottom of the rock to the temple is quite a climb. Originally, the king had the cave temple entrance roofed in gold. Once inside, one finds many fine carvings, all cut from the solid rock. There is a large, lovely reclining Buddha. Paintings on the wall behind him. Now we see the meditating Buddha repeated many times. A circle of meditating Buddhas around a Dagobah. Painting decorates every inch of the walls and ceilings of the caves. The caves has been used as a place of worship continuously since the last 2nd century BC. On a section of the ceiling are magnificently ferocious and evil demons sent by their master, the satanic Mara, to distract the Buddha from his meditation. They did not succeed. Mara corresponds to the devil in our culture. Here a devout monk holds a flask of holy water in his decorated right hand, while his left hand holds a rosary. My flash illuminated many wonderful things which were almost invisible in the darkness of the cave. When I left the caves, an impending storm had darkened the landscape. I found it so dramatic, I had to photograph it. Our next story tells a juicy piece of royal scandal as recounted in the invaluable Mahavansa Chronicle. This episode took place in the 5th century A.D., some 500 years later. I thought it might interest you. King Duttasena was a popular monarch, thought of as being both just and good by the people of Anuradhapura. This king had 2 sons, one named Moggallana, whose mother was of royal birth and the anointed queen, and the other son was named Kassapa, whose mother was a commoner. Cassiopa's mother was full of envy. Knowing witchcraft, she taught her son Cassiopa all she knew, telling him to seize the throne from his royal father. Cassiopa, who was an excellent pupil of his wicked mother's evil ways, captured his father and caused him to be plastered into a wall naked and alive. He then tried to assassinate his brother, Moggallana, the rightful heir, who has escaped to India in order to raise an army to recapture the throne. The populace of Anuradhapura was so incensed by the deeds of the parricide usurper, who was now their evil king. Cassiopa felt unsafe in the hostility, and so established himself a new capital at Sigiriya, some miles south of Anuradhapura, on this formidable rock, seen here from the northern side. Cassiopa's palace and the royal gardens were on the top of the rock, which arises close to 700 feet from the surrounding plain. While a royal palace and gardens were on the top, many royal buildings clung to the lower half of the rock, and magnificent gardens lay at the base surrounding the royal approach. Cassiopa cleared the jungle for miles around and had his new kingdom protected by deep moats and 30-foot fortified walls. Rainwater was collected in cisterns on the top of the rock to be ingeniously directed to use in filling the pools and waterways in the elaborate gardens existing at the base. Ascent to the king's citadel at the summit was accomplished in 2 phases, as it is today. The lower 350 feet of the climb is by steps cut into the living rock. Ascending, one discovers chiseled holes in the rock. I was told that these were sockets for the great beams which supported the many royal buildings. Here are more of these strange sockets. On a flattened surface is the remains of an audience hall, once enclosed and roofed over. The throne chiseled and skillfully smoothed. At the halfway point, a very high wall girdles the rock, its plastered surface polished almost to a mirror-like finish. A narrow path between the wall and the rock leads to the terrace of the fortified lion staircase, which is the only key entrance to the summit of Sigiriya. Here the terrace at the halfway point, we find this entrance to the summit. Originally, the 4 quarters and head of a great lion protected the ascent to the top. Only the lion paws remain of the once forbidding creature. Today, some iron ladders have been installed to facilitate the first half of the climb, after which one's footing is found on ridges of the rock. On the summit are foundations of the royal palace. Here we see one of the royal swimming pools. Looking down, one sees the remains of the royal entrance avenue surrounded by the once formal pools, waterways, and pleasure gardens. In the 18th year of King Cassiopa's reign, his brother Moggallana returned with an army of followers. Cassiopa was so sure of his strength that he led his troops out of their stronghold to meet the enemy. Cassiopa's elephant foundered in a bog and threw the king. His soldiers thought he was done for and ran in every direction. Cassiopa, seeing this disaster, drew his dagger and cut his own throat. I have kept the best of Sigiriya for the last. In a small recess in the wall of the great rock are a group of paintings which rate second to none in the world of Asian art. No one knows who painted them or actually what the paintings portray. To get to them, one has to climb to the halfway mark, passing the girdling wall, which leads to the lion's stairway we have just seen. Today the government has screened in the modern circular stairway, which leads to the paintings, as well as screening in the cave itself. The paintings belong to the 5th century of the Christian era and are considered to be as fine as anything produced during the Gupta age, which, of course, in India has been called the Golden Age of art. Here are the 3-quarter life-size figures which have survived in the rock alcove for 1,500 years. Please notice the freedom of the drawing and the delicacy of the colors. These beautiful creatures are blue-eyed. Since all seem to be moving in one direction, could they be going to a shrine to present offerings? One of the handmaidens carries a tray of flowers for her mistress. The lady who holds a frangipani. By the end of the 10th century A.D., the Chola kings of South India again invaded Lanka, subjugating Anuradhapura for 77 years. The capital moved south to Polonnaruwa. At times, Sinhalese had been in residence there since 700 A.D., though Anuradhapura was still the official capital. The South Indian invaders took over Polonnaruwa for a while too, but they're eventually chased out by the Sinhalese. By the mid-12th century, one of the great kings of Lanka started his reign in Polonnaruwa. His royal name was Parakrama Bahu I, referred to as the Great. Parakrama Bahu the Great not only restored the capital, but made it one of the most flourishing and beautiful cities imaginable. First, he entirely enclosed the city and surrounding area with 3 concentric walls, fortified walls they were. The buildings of the capital city, quoting from the Kulavamsa Chronicle, gleamed with coatings of lime, bright as autumn clouds. The brazen roof tiles dazzled the eye with the sunlight. The king built 1,000 great reservoir lakes here and there in his kingdom, the greatest of which one sees in this picture, and is called the Sea of Parakrama Bahu the Great. It covers an area of 125 square miles. And the countryside flourished. The king built himself a palace, the ruins of which you see here. The palace was, quote again, 7 stories high, furnished with 1,000 chambers. It was adorned with various furnishings and beds made of gold, ivory, and the like, and had costly coverings. The ruins which you see are only a fraction of the original palace. Today, one comes across broad stairways leading only into the sky. Among the many wonderful buildings ascribed to Parakrama Bahu the Great is the Tivanka Image House. This temple was part of the Jetavana Monastery. The Tivanka Image House enshrines the 20-foot, now headless, statue of the Buddha. The flowing lines of the statue have given it the name of Tivanka, which means 3 curves, or 3 bends. On the exterior walls, between graceful pilasters, are devotional figures, some having almost a Siamese look. Within the now roofless walls of the interior, leading to the Tivanka Buddha, are the most exquisite frescoes. Here is a Bodhisattva. And now the head of Deva. A scene from the Mugapaka Jataka. The Jatakas are the stories of Buddha's former lives. Leaving the Tivanka Image House, I will take you to the Gal Vihara, perhaps Parakrama Bahu's most outstanding monument. It's a short distance away, which gives one a chance to enjoy the tropical scenery. The Gal Vihara contains the most impressive statuary of the Polonnaruwa period. The statues were part of the Uttara Rama Monastery. 3 huge images are carved from outcropping of metamorphic rock. This meditating Buddha is seated on a throne. Behind his head is a halo in low relief, and then an ornamental arch with cusps supported by pillars from which Makara heads project. Makaras are the mythological animals. This side view of the meditating Buddha is almost nicer. Next is this marvelously expressive figure. For a time this was thought to be Ananda, the Lord Buddha's disciple, but today the scholars believe it indeed represents the Buddha himself shortly after his enlightenment. There is so much reserved feeling in this magnificent head. The veining of the rock adds to the beauty of the whole. In this picture we see the reclining figure of the Buddha in parinirvana, his final passing from life. Notice the exquisite folds on the Buddha's clothing and the traditional elongated ears. And finally, the expression of absolute peacefulness. With this image we leave Polonnaruwa and make our way to Kandy, high in the lush vegetation of the central massif. Kandy was the last refuge of the kings of Lanka, ending their 2,311 years of royal succession when the British took over in 1815, annexing the island. This beautiful part of India, with its high lyrical meadowlands and its majestic foothills, lies at the base of the western Himalayas. I visited this remoter part of India in order to see the countryside with its mountains and flowering valleys which had nurtured the exquisite school of painting called Pahari. Pahari means hill. I want to say right now that I don't pretend to be an authority on Indian painting, but there is a good reason why I have been in love with Rajput painting since my very early 20s. In that romantic part of my life, I acquired a pair of art books written by Ananda Coomaraswamy, who was the first scholar to bring these enchanting Rajput masterpieces to the attention of the Western world. I became bedazzled by these books. One of Coomaraswamy's paragraphs sealed my fate. I would love these Rajput paintings forever. I will quote, "Rajput art creates a world where all men are heroic, all women beautiful, passionate and shy. Beasts, both wild and tame, are friends of man, and trees and flowers are conscious of the footsteps of the bridegroom as he passes by. This magic world is not unreal or fanciful, but a world of imagination and eternity, visible to all who do not refuse to see with the eyes of love." End quote. Over the years, priceless jewels and riches had been donated by pious Hindus to Hindu temples, particularly to the famous temple of Somnath, situated on the shore of the Arabian Sea in Gujarat. These treasures had become known to the acquisitive Muslims whose territories were near Hindu India, which was also called Hindustan. The temple of Somnath had an extraordinary deity which remained in mid-air without any visible means of support from below or suspension from above. It was finally assumed that the deity was held in place by means of a great overhead magnet. I can only show you the ground plan of this temple, as the temple has been destroyed. The Sultan Muhammad of Ghazni, a state in Afghanistan, is seen here enthroned on an elephant. Curiously enough, the elephant is portrayed as being smaller than the horses which are behind it. He was a master of rapid, lethal raids on neighboring populations. He destroyed the mysterious floating god and demolished the temple. Mahmud returned to Afghanistan with unbelievable riches. The temple was rebuilt several times, only to be demolished and robbed again and destroyed again. In 1191, Turco-Afghan Muhammad Ghori attacked North India. He was challenged by Prithviraj, king of Delhi, born of the sacred fire at Mount Abu. King Prithviraj won that battle, but a few months later Muhammad Ghori returned with a larger army. This time he killed King Prithviraj. India was henceforth ruled for 334 years by the Turco-Afghan Muslims who called themselves the Delhi Sultanate. To continue the narrative, I must show you a map of a section of Central and South Asia which will help to place Samarkand, Tamerlane's capital, in perspective. As the crow flies, it was about 950 miles from Delhi. In this second map, one sees Samarkand as well as a small kingdom called Fargana. Fargana was about 275 miles from Samarkand. It was given by Tamerlane to a member of his family in the late 14th century or so. By the late 16th century, the king of Fargana's name was Uman Sheikh Mirza. His eldest son was 11 years old when his father was killed in a bizarre accident. The boy's name was Zahir-ud-Din Muhammad Babur. Babur means tiger and was a nickname. Babur the tiger was a direct descendant of Tamerlane on his father's side, and a direct descendant of Genghis Khan on his mother's side, so the blood of two formidable warriors flowed in his veins. When Babur realized he was now a ruler at 11 years old, his first idea was to conquer Samarkand with the revered tomb of his ancestor Tamerlane, the city's beautiful blue enamel buildings, its libraries and its gardens. He gathered a small army and did just that, but his disloyal relatives stole Fargana, his own ancestral home, from him. He ended up losing both Samarkand and Fargana. Babur, the young Mughal, did some growing up. He even got married and had children. An old woman kept telling him glowing tales about the riches and fascinations of India. Babur had never been attracted to India. First, she would tell him about the magnificence of the temples. Then she would describe the equal magnificence of Rajput palaces. Babur finally attacked India. After a number of attempts, Babur defeated the Delhi Sultanate at the Battle of Panipat. A year later, the Federation of Rajputs, 100,000 strong with 1,000 elephants, attacked Babur's 26,000 horses and men. Babur was addicted to wine and was losing the battle. Babur promised Allah that he would renounce wine and break his golden goblets if Allah would allow him to win. Babur did win. Babur became the founder of the brilliant Mughal Empire, which lasted for another 331 years on top of the Delhi Sultanate's 334 years. That means that the Muslims ruled Hindu India for 665 years. The first 6 emperors were known as the Great Mughals. After Aurangzeb, the 6th emperor's death in 1707, the empire deteriorated. The emperors remained, but became weak, self-indulgent and often very dissipated. The Mughal Empire came to an end in 1857 at the time of the Indian Mutiny, when the British Crown took over, disbanding the East India Company. In 1707, when Aurangzeb died, practically all of India was under Mughal rule. Only a small southern tip, coloured in green, was left free. The orange section was consolidated by Akbar. The mauve section was conquered by Aurangzeb, who wanted to make India a Muslim country. I want to start with Akbar, the 3rd Mughal emperor, whose reign lasted for 50 years. He was, of course, one of the great ones. It had been the custom for the Persian courts to maintain workshops of artists to illustrate their manuscripts. Akbar had brought with him to India 2 famous Persian masters of painting to start a royal painting workshop in his royal Indian court. These 2 masters had instructed Akbar and his father, Humayun, at an earlier date. The emperor searched all of India to collect the most talented painters, regardless of their religion, to work under the 2 Persian masters. The style abandoned the Persian look, which we see here in this Persian court painting of Muhammad's visit to paradise, dated 1436 A.D. And painting developed the unmistakable Mughal look, as seen in this painting from the Akbarnama. Akbar is crossing a river, latter part of the 16th century. Akbar had an insatiable intellectual curiosity. a great, tolerant desire to understand and respect other religions as well as his own. He was, of course, a brilliant warrior, and he had a real love of the arts, particularly painting. Unlike Babur, who had written an outstanding autobiography, and other royal relatives who wrote good memoirs, Akbar found reading difficult. Probably he was dyslexic, as were Leonardo da Vinci, Einstein, and Beethoven, to name a few of the towering geniuses who managed with this disability. Every night Akbar was read aloud to. His knowledge was formidable. Akbar's son, who became Emperor Jahangir, had more knowledge of painting than his father did, if it is possible to imagine it. Here he is portrayed holding the world in his right hand. This would have suited him very well, as he was very self-centered. The painting is by Bichita, early 17th century. This painting shows him patronizingly embracing Shah Abbas of Persia as he had him stand on a lamb, while Emperor Jahangir stands on a lion. The nimbus is behind Jahangir's head, of course. It is painted by Abdul Hassan, 1620. Jahangir was a skilled naturalist. He ordered accurate and excellent paintings of animals and plants. Jahangir's son, Shah Jahan, also had a workshop of expert artists. He poses holding a turban jewel in this portrait by Abdul Hassan, dated 1617. And here Shah Jahan rides his beautiful war horse. But Shah Jahan's real genius was architecture. He built in marble, embellished with semi-precious and precious stones. He was the builder of the Taj Mahal, his beloved wife's mausoleum. I was lucky enough to photograph this in the moonlight. In fact, I have a whole series of these moonlight photographs. Eventually, Shah Jahan's third son, Aurangzeb, captured his father, imprisoning him in the Agra fort, where he was confined to a part of the former ladies' quarters, where he remained for the rest of his life. He could see the Taj Mahal, but never approach it. He died as he gazed at his beloved queen's tomb. Emperor Aurangzeb was very orthodox and a strict Muslim. His reign lasted for 50 years, in which time he conquered almost all of South India and the Deccan. He demolished many Hindu temples and discouraged the arts. The court workshops languished. The artists wandered to the Hindu Rajput princely courts in search of work. Mughal painting did not cease in the years to follow, but there were changes. Painting in the Deccan had developed concurrently with imperial Mughal painting. 3 independent Muslim kingdoms, Bijapur, Golconda, and Amnagar, left masterful paintings of the greatest beauty, quite different from the imperial Mughal paintings. When the Mughal artists joined the Rajput princely courts, their subject matter became very different. Of course, there were portraits of royalty on prancing horses and hunting scenes, but the subject matter was also much involved with the love stories of Radha and Krishna, with poetry and mythology. As my presentation is about my wonderful journey in the valleys of the sky, we should start our travels in the western Himalayan foothills now. I would like to introduce you to the gentleman who made my trip through the Pahari Rajput kingdoms possible. This is the Maharaj Kumar, Brijraj Singh of Kota, husband of one of my most cherished friends. He is the eldest son of the Maharao of Kota, a very important former princely state of Rajasthan. I will refer to the Maharaj Kumar as MK from now on. Kota produced some excellent and very original paintings in the princely workshops. MK has written a most interesting and beautifully illustrated book entitled The Kingdom That Was Kota. Here is the trusty jeep that took us safely on the circuitous and narrow mountain roads. MK stands on the left, and Banwar Singh, a loyal Rajput retainer from Kota, on the right. our impressive license plate, the royal coat of arms on the left, and Shiva's insignia on the right. On the middle left of this map, one sees the large former princely kingdoms of Rajasthan. The Pahari country up in the Himalayas is some 300 miles long and roughly 100 miles wide. I only had space to write in 8 names, but actually there were about 35 or 40 sovereign kingdoms, far smaller but just as proud as the great Rajput kingdoms of Rajasthan. These Himalayan Rajput states produced the Pahari Rajput painting. We start our journey in pouring rain, and it poured without mercy almost every day. Photography was difficult, and it was so unseasonably cold that we stopped to get me extra shawls and scarves at sundry villages. Suddenly we came upon a joyful sight, blossoms and the chirping of birds in the mating season. The valleys of the Himalayan foothills were bursting with fertility. A villager carries fodder for his animals. Notice the width of the road. I sat on the left, which is without a door, and sometimes the drop on my side was 1,000 feet down. As we climb, conifers and rhododendron appear. Rhododendron grow as high as trees. Finally, we begin to see the western Himalayas. Majestic ranges. The people of the hill country are very handsome with fine, strong features. Cows are roped together so that they wander and graze in a group. This makes it easier to catch them. If one catches one, they all follow. They have to. On our way, we pass canals encased in cement. This water is flowing from the Bias Sutlej Link project to the Punjab, Haryana, and Rajasthan states. It involves the water from the Bias River, which is diverted by under-mountain tunnels, the broken lines, and above-ground canals, the solid lines, and again a second under-mountain tunnel, a total of 38 kilometers. It then explodes into the Sutlej River at the Dihar power plant. 3 great dams take part in this remarkable achievement, which will bring power and irrigation water to northwestern India. I did not realize when I took this photograph that it was strictly against the law, but here it is since I had it. As Hindus feel that God is everywhere and in everything, a tree can become a temple. We have arrived in Sundarnagar, capital of Sukhait, as guests of His Highness the Raja of Sukhait. A herdsman tries to make room for the car to pass. As the Raja of Sukhait was detained in New Delhi, he arranged for our party to be put up at the Government Circuit House, a series of very well-appointed rooms with verandas and all conveniences. The accommodations were provided for the engineers who look after the Dihar power plant. The early morning view from my veranda. By rising before dawn, I got some nice pictures of the Dharmasala mountain range. Usually by sunrise, the clouds have obscured the mountains. As these pictures were taken on different days, I was lucky this day. No clouds. The foreground, which looks like a lake, is mist. The Raja's sister-in-law, Princess Ritu Ramaswar Singh, was a charming hostess and invited us to her land. She is a young lady with lots of initiative and came to Kenneth Square to try to learn about raising mushrooms. Here she is telling MK and Mr. M.R. Kalbe, chief engineer of the Bias project, that the American growers didn't tell her too much, but she has learned a good deal anyway. MK congratulates her. She shows us the mushroom farm building which her farmers put up for her, and she gave us the most beautiful, perfect white mushrooms, which we took home and made into a delectable dish for supper. She is very pleased with our interest. and MK is impressed. The princess and her husband will build themselves a house where she stands facing the mountains. She plans to have a herd of cows. The mother and calf is the beginning. At this point, I want to briefly sketch what happened when the Mughal-trained artists came to work for the Hindu Rajputs in the Pahari country. The subject matter of the Hindu paintings was very different from that of the Mughal, and the style passed through 3 stages. The early style was named for a small state called Basoli. It was very vigorous, using areas of primary colors, and often was framed by a band of red. This style spread through the Pahari states, being called the Basoli school. This painting represents the Lord Krishna killing the demon horse Keshi from the Bhagavata Purana series, circa 1675 to 1700. The second example of Basoli represents Radha, energetically giving buttermilk to her lover Krishna. This is a 1690 painting. The third Basoli example is an illustration from the poem Rasamanjari by Bhanudatta. The luminescent jewels representing emeralds were made with dark green beetle wings applied to the paper. This is 1690. Abruptly there was a great change in the style of Pahari painting. Nadir Shah of Persia had invaded and decimated Delhi. People ran for their lives. Mughal-trained painters fled to Rajput courts, hoping for sanctuary and work. The influence of the Mughal-trained artists introduced delicate, realistic features on faces and subtly blended colors. This new style was called Gulair, as it started in this state, though, like Basoli, it spread to other kingdoms. The Gulair painting you see is called The Gathering Storm, and it is dated 1700 and attributed to Gur Saha. This lovely miniature is called Lady Listening to Music, and it is one of my favorites, and it is also Gulair, circa 1750. We now see Ragim Hamir, wife of Raga Mega, a musical mold, and it is Gulair 1800. The third and last phase of painting was called Kangra. In the museum of the Chandigarh University is a nice explanation of this style. Quote, a number of factors contributed to the development of the Kangra style: the Mughal technique of painting, the inspiration of Vaishnavism, the charm of Sanskrit poetry, the beauty of the people of the Kangra Valley, and the lovely landscape of the Punjab hills. A few examples of the Kangra style. First, Krishna entrances the already bedazzled cowherdesses. The sound of Lord Krishna's flute was so irresistible to the cowherdesses that these ladies would break the bondages that their husbands had contrived to keep them from escaping to meet Krishna. When they reached him, he magically would make each one think that they were the only one with him. From the Gita Govinda. The second is called the Radiant Beauty. Radha prepares a meal for her lover Krishna. This is Kangra 1775. The next Kangra examples are from the Ragamala paintings. These ragas are musical modes with a sequence of notes which can be improvised upon. Each mode creates a specific mood to the listener. A raga is considered male and has 5 wives, who are called raginis. The raga also has 8 sons called putras. Of course, the raga's wives and sons reflect the tonal mood of the raga. Our Occidental music easily recognizes that the sequence of notes in a major scale has a cheerful influence, and the minor scales have an introspective, saddening effect, unless one is tone deaf, of course. Anyway, this Ragamala miniature is called Ragavesanta. It is a melody of spring. The joy of spring is shown with vivacity in this painting of Krishna dancing as Radha accompanies him with a beflowered drum. This is Raga Chandra. Chandra ragas are named after the moon. This raga is only sung at the time of the full moon after midnight. A Rajput state that once had a fine painting workshop. The flags on the bridge are Buddhist prayer flags, though the Raja of Mandi is a Hindu Rajput. A Sikh vendor who wraps his turban slightly differently from that which we are used to. He sells delicious nuts very carefully weighed. A Hindu looks on. Notice his turban and how his turban is wrapped quite differently. The palace of the Raja of Mandi. Even though the Bahari palaces are much smaller than the palaces of Rajasthan, they have enormous dignity. In the now abandoned dining room is a portrait of His Highness the Raja of Mandi. Our journey took us next to the Kulu Valley by way of the Kulu Pass, bordered by towering rock cliffs. The Bias River flows through the narrow gorge. I had been told by Her Highness the Rani of Sukhet that as we advanced, the rocks would seem to close in on us. In the Kulu Pass, a veritable deluge forced us to close all the sides of the jeep. Photography was impossible. In fact, we could hardly see anything. As we emerged from the gorge, the sun came out. In the Kulu Valley, the apple blossoms blooming in profusion and the emerald green grass are beautiful foils for each other. Kulu children, like all Indian children, love to be photographed. Kulu women have a way of wrapping a tweed blanket around themselves, bringing the corners over the shoulders and safety pinning the corners. They also wear a belt to secure it. When we were in Sundanaga, we added the assistant engineer of the Bias Sutlej Link project to our party. A Sikh, as you can tell from his turban. He was a very obliging young man and always ready to be helpful. From Kulu, we will go to Manali. This turbulent mountain stream makes me feel cold to look at it. Villages from Manali. Typical shops. Here, MK on the right and my Sikh friend on the left. Behind the two gentlemen is the well-appointed, unheated circuit house where we all stayed. No one is ever cold but myself. The view from the veranda. Notice the forsythia on the lawn and the snow on the mountain. A short walk warmed me up a little. The enchantment of apple blossoms and snow. The countryside can be rugged. And then we come to the softness of pussy willows. Friendly mountaineers. You couldn't help but like them. And their children even more. We are approaching the head of the Rotang Pass, starting at 13,500 feet altitude. The engineer and MK pose for me. My three companions and the sturdy jeep. A typical mountain farmhouse. It shelters the entire extended family, animals and crops. This one has a fruit tree and stores hay. Now we overlook the Kangra Valley, a valley so fertile and enviable that Akbar, who tried to avoid irritating the Hindus, took it over anyway. Looking down on the terraces of a small farm is a lovely sight. Notice the crops are stacked high on a tree. This is to save it from animal nibbling as it dries. A farm lady with a plaid blanket worn in the usual way goes about her business. Haystacks, blossoms, and tender green grass. Seen against a mountain. There is such beauty on every side. Rectangular patches of mustard are planted at different times so that they may ripen independently. It is a pretty sight. Crops have been seeded and are starting to grow in patches. The bridge leading into the town of Kangra. Here is the modern town of Kangra. A silver ribbon winds through the countryside. It was impossible to read this placard at the Kangra Fort grounds, so I photographed it and deciphered it at home. We are approaching one of the great historical spots of India, the Kangra Fort, a splendid monument of great architectural significance which has had succeeded and are starting to grow in patches. The bridge leading into the town of Kangra. Here is the modern town of Kangra. A silver ribbon winds through the countryside. It was impossible to read this placard at the Kangra Fort grounds, so I photographed it and deciphered it at home. We are approaching one of the great historical spots of India, the Kangra Fort, a splendid monument of great architectural significance which has had a checkered career. It is said to have been built by Susarma Chandra shortly after the Mahabharata war. Now, this more or less mythological war is sometimes dated between 650 and 850 B.C. The young man in the doorway saved my life by helping me carry my camera equipment. My heart was pumping so hard I thought my children in America would hear it and send me a cable, "Mother, come home at once." Alexander the Great, 337 B.C., sent a contingent of cavalry to take the fort, but the billboard did not say whether Alexander won or lost the battle. It was the stronghold of the Kangra, known in ancient times as Trigrata, and was under the sway of the Katosh rulers, even at the time when the capital was under the influence of Julanda. Please notice the interminable steps. The datable history of the fort begins from 1009 A.D., when it was occupied by Muhammad Ghaznavi with a huge accumulation of treasure. It remained under Muhammad Ghaznavi for 30 years, after which it was recaptured by the Raja of Delhi in 1043 A.D., remaining in Hindu hands for 3 centuries. We begin to see the palace now. Next, it was taken over by Muhammad Tughlaq in 1337 to 51 A.D. until his death. The Hindus retook it. Again it was recaptured by Feroz Shah Tughlaq in 1357 A.D., who found it a very secure stronghold. It remained in Muslim hands until 1526 A.D. The beautifully carved Lakshmi Narayan temple is still intact, dated 9th and 10th century, and it is perfectly beautiful. Finally, it was taken over by Akbar the Great in 1556, continuing under the Mughals until 1783. Sansar Chand, distinguished Raja of the Hills, took it over. Sansar Chand surrendered the fort to the Maharaja Pandit Singh of Lahore. The Sikhs held it for 34 years, then the British took it over in 1846. The fort is enclosed with high ramparts and deep natural moats. After leaving the fort, the sun came out and we drove on. I wasn't quite sure where we were going and I was too tired to ask. We had gone through impressive gates and along quite a lengthy driveway, surrounded by gardens, the grounds beautifully kept up. We drove up to a charming house, which M.K. told me is now called the Palace Motel, as they take in paying guests. The former Rajput royal families have to find some way of earning money, as their funds were taken when they gave up their sovereignty to create a unified India. It originally was the palace of a Nawab, and is run today by the cousin of the late Rajmata, mother of His Highness the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, Dr. Karan Singh. It is a delightful, comfortable house, and M.K. and the manager are waiting for tea to be brought. We're told of a Buddhist monastery, Tashi Jung, not far off, where we would be welcome to visit. This is the head monk. 2 of his gentle friends who didn't seem to mind us either. Here is the monastery. There were various shrines, cared for lovingly by the monks. This monk specialized in prayer flags. On taking our leave of these kindly people, we started a long, winding trek to the palace and temple of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His permanent residence is called Dharamsala. The scenery is superb. As you can see, it's raining again, but what a view! And we are met by a magnificent black mountain goat. MK stands in front of the temple. He doesn't mind the rain. Two monks want their pictures taken, rain or no rain. To pray, one walks along flicking the cylinders so that the prayers inside them spin. In that way you don't have to say your prayers yourself. Looking down at the Dalai Lama's palace. On leaving, we came to a typical rural scene, the cows roped together. Here we arrive at the gates of Chamba, another Bahari Rajput state. I call your attention to the mountain and river beyond the gates. I think the gate is lovely, and the young man very distinguished. There is a fine museum in Chamba. I was given permission to photograph the paintings, which was a wonderful privilege. The roads can only be maneuvered by jeep. The upper building is a guest house for relatives of VIPs. We went to see the Lakshmi Narayan temple. The Narayan image in the shrine is very beautiful and glowing. Now we have arrived in Jammu, which is our last stop. On the distant cliff is the original royal fort palace of Jammu, now the property of the Indian government. As it is used for offices, murals and the like have not been protected. A smaller and more modern palace has been built by the former rulers of Jammu and Kashmir for their own use. It is in this palace that we were guests of His Highness the present Maharaja. It is called the Hari Niwas Palace. The veranda of the palace, vista of mountains and a glimpse of the river from the veranda. A little further down the driveway is the Amar Mahal Palace, the former residence of the late Maharani Tara Devi, mother of the present Maharaja. This palace was turned into a museum and public library by His Highness the present Maharaja and open to the public. However, in a room to which there are 4 locks and 4 separate keys, held by 4 different individuals, is the solid gold coronation throne. Special permission was given to me to see and photograph it. This is the canopy, which was suspended over the throne. It is embroidered with solid gold thread, of course. On the upper floors of the Amar Mahal Palace is the late Maharani Tara Devi's personal suite, which is now a shrine. Again, I was generously allowed to see and photograph it. A view of her private apartment. A window, the tea table set up to overlook the garden. A portrait of the Rajmata Tara Devi in puja. Puja is worship with offerings. Tara Devi was no longer called Maharani after her royal husband's death. The title Rajmata means mother of the present ruler, perhaps equivalent to Queen Mum. The bedroom alcove of Her Highness the Rajmata. A family photo. Standing left to right, Their Highnesses the late Maharaja Hari Singh and the present Maharaja Dr. Karan Singh. Seated, Their Highnesses the present Maharani Yasho Raja Lakshmi and her late mother-in-law, the Maharani Tara Devi. She was still the Maharani at this time because her husband was living. To close, I will show you the exquisite series of the Kangra miniatures which tell the love story of Nala and Damayanti leading up to Damayanti's Swayamvara. A Swayamvara was a premarital ceremony in which, in ancient times, a lady of noble birth would herself choose her future husband. Photographing these miniatures was one of the main objectives of my trip, and I am deeply grateful to His Highness the Maharaja Dr. Karan Singh for his permission to photograph the paintings, and to Professor S.N. Vaklu, curator and librarian of the Amar Mahal Museum, for the unstinting and generous sharing of his knowledge with me. Nala and Damayanti. The glory of the court of Nala, a prince of Nishada in central India. This prince was fairer than any man on earth. Nala has returned from victorious battle and is honored with the ceremony of circular waving of lights, called arti or arati sometimes. Pangyrists singing praises of Nala to Damayanti's father, King Bhima of Kundinapura. Damayanti, the most exquisite of all ladies in India, has instructed a painter to portray a pair of lovers. Nala in a pensive mood. He has heard of Damayanti's virtues and matchless beauty. Nala sitting sadly among his courtiers, longing for Damayanti. By way of diversion, a horse is brought for Nala to ride. He goes for a ride accompanied by his courtiers. Nala in his garden, wondering how he can send a message to Damayanti. He catches a swan, telling him to fly to Kundinapura, Damayanti's palace, to express his love to Damayanti. The swan assures Nala that he will deliver the message. Nala releases the swan. Nala in his garden awaits the swan's answer. The swan flies towards Kundinapura, the royal city of King Bhima, Damayanti's father. The swan has alighted in Damayanti's garden and delivers Nala's message. Damayanti watches the swan fly back. The swan reports to Nala. Sight unseen, Damayanti has fallen in love with Nala and cannot endure separation from him. Damayanti is tormented by clouds. In monsoon time, lovers particularly long for each other in India. She accuses the moon. She falls in a swoon. Her father, King Bhima, visits her. King Bhima tries to comfort Damayanti. The date of Damayanti's Swayamvara is astrologically determined by the Brahmin. Announcement is made. The sage Narada and disciple Parvata visits the god Indra to convey the invitation to Damayanti's Swayamvara. Narada bids farewell to god Indra. The gods who have been invited as well as the princes go to Damayanti's Swayamvara. They see Nala on the way. The gods appoint Nala as the emissary to speak to Damayanti on their behalf. This is distressing to Nala as he goes to court her himself. Nala resumes his journey to Damayanti's royal city, Kundinapura. The gods have made Nala invisible so he can enter King Bhima's palace and find Damayanti. Nala goes invisibly to Damayanti's apartment. There is turmoil in the palace. The women are perplexed to see Nala's bodiless shadow. Damayanti realizes that the invisible one is Nala and garlands him, thus choosing him for her husband. The god Indra's female messenger has previously brought a garland of parijata flowers from Indra's garden. Damayanti received this garland from Lord Indra before Nala had arrived. Nala in conversation with Damayanti. The swan urges Nala to reveal his identity. Nala takes leave of Damayanti. Damayanti is in a thoughtful mood. The princes go to Damayanti's Swayamvara. King Bhima receives his Swayamvara guests. The assembly of princes in King Bhima's palace. The second half of Nala and Damayanti's love story, which was not included in this beautiful series of paintings, was quite hair-raising, but it all came out all right in the end, I'm glad to say. And so, my photographic mission being accomplished, we now come to the end